Hello anatomists, and welcome back to part 2, Cardiovascular and Lymphatic. So we're going to start out this video looking at the heart. So let's go through some general heart info. We'll get into some anatomy and how it functions. Okay. So first off, the heart is a two-sided pump. We've got our right side. Ooh, silver sparkles. Our right side of our pump pumps to our lungs. What do you think it picks up there? Oxygen. So the right side of our heart is called the pulmonary circuit. It pumps for the pulmonary side to pick up oxygen from the air we're breathing in and to drop off carbon dioxide. It goes to lungs. Pulmonary has to do with lungs. So once it goes through, it comes back to the left side. And the left side is going to be the pump for the systemic circuit. So the systemic circuit is going to pump to the body, to the whole systems. So all of our body tissues, except for those that are avascular. So here, the blood is going to drop off the oxygen for them, and it's going to pick up the CO2 waste that they made. It's also going to drop off nutrients for the cells and pick up wastes. So we're going to go out through the aorta to the body tissues, and then it's going to come back again to the right side. So right side to lungs, pick up oxygen, left side to the body, drop that oxygen off. Then we come back to the heart. And arteries always go away from the heart. And on the right side, that means they're going to be taking the deoxygenated blood that comes in and pumping them to the lungs. So those arteries are deoxygenated, right? They're going to the lungs to pick up oxygen. So a lot of the times you'll hear arteries have oxygen. That's opposite for your right side. The systemic, those arteries going away with oxygenated blood to the tissues, right on. They're colored right on these diagrams because they're oxygen rich. But the right side is the opposite. Okay, so let's go through a little bit more heart anatomy. So we've got our right side and our left side. Our heart sits behind our sternum, goes from about the 2nd to 5th rib. And we've got our lungs on the sides, right? So our heart has 4 chambers total. Each pump has 2, right? So humans have 4 total. So do all the other mammals like cows, sheep, etc., as well as alligators and crocodiles. Fun fact. Okay. So on the top on each side, we have blood flowing in. Those smaller superior chambers are the atria. So blood enters through the veins, from veins. Our right side will have, oh, I'm moving myself. Yeah, let's move this up here so I'm out of the way. Our right side will have blood flowing in from the superior and inferior vena cavas, as well as the coronary sulcus from the back of the heart. And the left side of our heart will have the pulmonary veins coming from the lungs with oxygen-rich blood. So blood enters each pump on the top in the atria. And they're low pressure. And then those atria are connected to the chambers underneath. Those are the ventricles. So these larger spaces, thick muscular walls, are the ventricles that blood flows into from the atria. And so when those ventricles contract, blood is going to flow out through arteries. Okay? They contract and eject blood out through arteries. So 4 chambers, 2 pumps. Right pump, left pump, top chambers of the atria, inferior bottom chambers are the ventricles. And when those contract, they push blood out. So how do we make sure blood goes the direction I'm saying? We have valves. These valves are going to prevent that backflow. So we've got 2 sets. The first set is the atrioventricular valves, or the AV valves. Based on their name, you might have a pretty good guess of what they're between. They are between the atria and the ventricles. So once blood enters the ventricles, it won't flow back into the atria. So here's one, and there's the other. And then the semilunar valves are going to be between the ventricles and the arteries leading away from them. So there's one, and the other is back here. So blood will leave that ventricle, this one, going through those valves. So let's look more at each of those sets. The sounds that you hear in your heart, the boom boom, the lub dub, is those valves slamming shut. So the first valves that are open are those AV valves. Blood flows into the ventricles, they slam shut, the ventricles contract, push blood out through the semilunar, so they open. And then once the ventricles relax, those semilunar valves slam shut. Dum, boom boom, boom boom. AV, semilunar, AV, semilunar. Okay, so let's look at these. So the AV valves, oh, here I go, I'm up here now. I'm superior. Okay, haha, anatomy joke. Okay, so the AV valves are the cuspids. They've got these cups, these flaps that sit down. The tricuspid is on the right side. It's on the right side. The bicuspid or mitral is on the left. Right? Up here, there's the tricuspid. There's the bicuspid. Tricuspid has 3 of those flaps. They've got the heartstrings or the chordae tendineae connected down to these papillary muscles of the heart. So when the ventricles contract, the papillary muscles pull and bring those valves shut. And then the semilunar valves, they are named for the vessel that they lead to. So the aortic semilunar valve is going to be this one back here, this one here, leading on the left side to the aorta. And then the other is the pulmonary semilunar valve, leading on the right side to the pulmonary trunk. And that will lead then to the right and left pulmonary arteries, because we're going away from the heart, to the lungs to pick up oxygen. And they're called semilunar because they have these like little cups. They look like little half moons. We'll see a picture of it on the next slide. Okay. So here we've got an AV. We've got those heartstrings attached down to these lovely papillary muscles. And then there's a really pretty semilunar valve with those 3 little cups. So when the ventricles are under high pressure, that forces blood through there. And then when they relax, the blood hits the cups and it can't go back into the ventricle. If you have a valve that doesn't fully shut right, it's a murmur. You can hear it. In children, it usually gets better on its own over time. And in adults, it can be indicative of issues. It can cause problems. Okay. So to summarize, the pulmonary circuit, I'll move myself here, is the right side of the heart going to the lungs, right? So let's trace the flow of blood. You should be able to do this. Okay, so we've got it listed below. I'll make this bigger so you can see it all. So blood has gone out to the body, dropped off its oxygen, its nutrients, picked up wastes, and it comes in to the right atrium. And then it goes from the right atrium through the tricuspid into the right ventricle. From the right ventricle through the pulmonary valve, or pulmonary semilunar valve, into the pulmonary trunk, which then goes to the right and left pulmonary arteries to the lungs. So these capillaries we're doing that gas exchange. We're picking up oxygen. We're dropping off CO2. Oh, that's not too pretty. Okay, and now we're going to head back to the heart. So returning, we've got veins. So it's the pulmonary veins that then lead into the left side of the heart, into the left atrium. Okay. Does that make sense? So go through this on your own, practice it, rewatch what I just said until you can say it on your own. Okay. Now let's look at the systemic circuit. So the systemic, we're going to start where we left off in the previous, in the left atrium. So we saw how blood flowed into the left atrium. Now we're going to go through the mitral or bicuspid, into the left ventricle, through the aortic valve, into the aorta. That's going to branch, go to all of our body tissues. We're going to drop off the oxygen for our cells, and we're going to pick up that carbon dioxide waste. And at the capillaries, then we're going to start returning. We're going to go through our superior or inferior vena cava, or the coronary sulcus on the back of the heart, into the right atrium. Okay. Cool. So you must be thinking to yourself, hey, that's great, but like the heart's pretty thick. I bet oxygen can't just diffuse into the middle of the heart muscle. And you're right, it can't. We need coronary circulation to do that. So we have coronary arteries and veins that are giving blood flow to the heart muscle itself. So coronary arteries are shown here going away from the heart. You've got your widow maker there, that if you have a heart attack, it leads to a lot of blood vessels. It's likely to die. People are likely to die when they have that happen. And so then those give up the oxygen, and then it moves back and is returned to the heart in the back on the coronary sulcus. Great. Okay. So now let's look at the physiology. What do these contractions mean? How does it work? So when part of the heart is contracting, it's called systole, and when it's relaxing, it's called diastole. So when we have our heart contract, first the atria go into systole, and then they relax in diastole, and then the ventricles contract, and then relax. So they're going to be sending electrical signals to do this, and we can monitor that. Because when a heart cell contracts, it's getting the signal just like skeletal muscle. So it's getting an action potential. Our cells are negatively charged at rest, and they go less negative, they depolarize, right? And so our heart is really cool because we have the pacemaker cells in our right atrium that are constantly depolarizing on their own. And so every time they depolarize, that signal is going to spread through the whole heart and have a heartbeat. So those cells send the signals through gap junctions. You'll have ions flowing cell to cell, and all the cells in the same area contract at once. Okay? So each time with an action potential, we'll be negatively charged, we'll depolarize, woo, and then repolarize and reset, right? So that electrical signal, where we get more positive, and when we drop back down, is going to be able to be read by an electrocardiogram, an ECG or EKG, cardio if you're German K. And there are parts to that, so it's measuring the overall electrical signals. So you have these different waves when the electrical signal is going through. And we will continue this on our next part of the video lecture. Practice this, take a break before you go on to the next.